Ranieri tries one.
But I thought getting to the Champions League final was supposed to be easy. This is not that kind of Gooner, an Arsenal podcast, and we're coming to you after a 1-0 loss at home to PSG. Apparently, not every team in the Champions League at this stage is the pair of saloon doors that Carlo Ancelotti's Real Madrid turned out to be. We're going to get into several aspects of the game. We're going to talk about a couple different performers, certain absence, how we feel hitting the away leg, and some other things as well. But first of all, before we get into that, let's do some housekeeping. I'm Sham. You can follow me on Twitter at Shamsdale, and you can follow me on Blue Sky at Shamsdale. With me is John, who you can follow on Twitter at 305cast and on Blue Sky at yellowribbons.bsky.social. John, how you doing, my friend?
I'm good. Well, I'm good, but I feel like this game was kind of a little bit of a gut punch. Just especially like the first 15 minutes, it was kind of shocking, and then I guess we could talk about the rest of it being a little bit shocking as well. Yeah, I think there's a lot. I'm not out of it though, right? We're definitely in this tie, and I'm excited about the return leg. But we definitely, in Arsenal fashion, did not make things easy for ourselves.
No, it's going to have to be probably a historic night for us in Paris, which I'm still optimistic. I still think we can do it, but yeah, it's not the easiest position that we put ourselves in, but we're definitely by no means out of it. Yeah, probably a little bit more on that later in the pod. And with us as well is Drew, who you can follow on Twitter at GeecheeKid, and you can follow on Blue Sky at supplyinddemandrew.bsky.social. Drew, how are you doing?
I'm better because you got the Blue Sky name correct first time.
I nailed it.
You did without the wrong thing.
You know why that is? Because it's not at 7. Because we're not recording at 7:00 in the morning.
I mean, fair.
It was worth it. It was worth it though. But yeah,
it was. How I'm feeling? Yeah, I mean, I probably echo how you guys feel. I mean, yeah, PSG are good. Period. Semifinal of the Champions League, anything can happen. We saw it with Barca today, 2-0 down in 20, 25 minutes. So yeah, I think there's still so much to play for, but there's some talking points I would like us to get to that are even beyond what we saw on the pitch. I think it's important. But yeah, optimistic still. Anything is possible. Yeah, still so much to play for. So
we're only down by 1.
Yeah.
That's it.
Well, And kind of before we get into what happened on the pitch, I think that's something that we really should address. Where there really seems to be this attitude online and among the fan base where like that's it, it's over, we're done, ties over, and we should just give up, not tune in on Wednesday, and that's the end of it. 2024-2025 season has reached its conclusion, and I just I don't understand that. Like we're looking at a team that just kicked Real Madrid's ass when the entire world said that we couldn't do it, right? So we had a bad 25 minutes to start. We got punished for it. It happens, right? But like I'm actually really encouraged by things I saw in this game, and that's something that we'll talk about. But I still think it's all there for us. We did a great job. Or at least we rode our luck enough where we are not down multiple goals. It's just one. It's just one goal. We can score 2 goals against PSG. So, yeah, I just kind of wanted to check you guys' temperature on that. Where again, it feels like people are giving up, and it's just way too early, in my opinion.
I mean, I think a lot of it's PTSD. And I don't use that term like lightly, but I do feel like a lot of fans instantaneously see an issue and they're like, well, here we go again, kind of things. Like the expected result is now that we're down after the first leg. That's it after that. You know what I mean? But I also feel like in a way, if anything, we should find context of how Real Madrid fans thought about the second leg. And it's not because there was certainly a certain level of delusion, I feel like, because people were forgetting about how disjointed they are on the pitch. But overall, Real Madrid fans usually feel like they can come back, even when they're down after the first leg. And because they've seen the team's ability to do it before, they know that the quality is there. And I think in a vacuum, fans know how good we can be. I feel like a lot of it is probably avoidance. They're just like, I don't want to get my hopes up. To me, it's done now. And then that way, if you come back, then they're surprised, and it's all of a sudden a surprise. And there was some interesting discourse on Twitter today about how people were calling out a certain AFTV member for a lot of his ranting and raving after the first leg. And they were like, well, I want you to hold that same energy if we come back and win in the second leg. Stop being performative. And I think a lot of fans just like, they almost find excuses to just get mad and write things off because they would rather be surprised than disappointed. And while I can understand that to a point, that to me feels like you're only a fair weather supporter in some degree. You should always have faith that your team can come back, especially when they're only down a goal. Especially after seeing us settle after the half hour mark. We had chances to level the scoreline before 90 minutes. This is without Partey in the lineup. It's with a lot of our players being off the boil. Doc included wasn't at his best. We know we have another level too we can get to, right? So if we know all that to be true, the doom and gloom, to me, I feel it's just performative protection, because, waiting for the worst case scenario and then hoping for the best secretly after the fact.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with that.
Yeah. John, how about you?
Yeah, I get the comfort in being able to like not allow yourself to feel the hope of the second leg. This is a very difficult team. We have, like Drew said, kind of a collective, as a fan base, like a collective anxiety about this tournament in general, let alone this far in this tournament. And I think just the way that we conceded that first goal was really like all of our fears realized really before we had a chance to kind of realize it was kind of take note of what was happening. So it was kind of a gut punch in that regard. But again, I do understand the comfort in rationalizing away certain things, but then to kind of put this task that we have ahead of us as like a done deal that we're not going to get through, right? I understand why you would want to think that, and it's kind of like expect the worst, plan, hope for the best, and then you're either completely neutral in what happens, in that you already anticipated that you were going to lose, or you're happily surprised and you end up winning. And I think that that kind of that gamble, like wager with your emotions, is something that we've seen a lot in sports, not just with Arsenal fans, but across any kind of sport fandom. And I've experienced it myself. I've kind of had to put the brakes on that kind of thinking, because it is only 1-0, and we do have a good team. We are going to have Thomas Partey back, hopefully. Hopefully everyone's fit and fine for that game as well, and there's no surprises, which is another story. But and then you just got to hope that they go in there and play their hearts out, right? Because if they don't do it now, I don't. Any other game this season should pale in comparison to the fire that we see from these players next week.
Yeah,
It should be ludicrous. It should be, the PSG should be scared of the way these players come out even before they even get onto the pitch. That's the kind of energy that they need to bring to this match. And I think if we can see that early on from the whistle, it's going to calm a lot of people down. And then I feel like we start getting some possession early on. If we could do that, kind of calm that stadium down a little bit, a lot of people are going to start feeling a little better. The players are going to get a little bit more confidence, and it should be a different kind of game, because we saw the ability to control the game as it went on. I thought the second half, and like after that first 20 minutes, we kind of got into it and kind of started locking things down, and we started seeing what we know we can do from a control perspective, even without Thomas Partey. So, we have our criticisms of him, but I think that, and we'll get into it, I think that he was missing in this midfield.
Yeah. Just final point on the fans. I I think some people engage in emotional divestment,
Mm.
and I think they're afraid of getting hurt at the end of all this. And every season is a journey, and it's a build up to hopefully glory at the end. And I think we've come short so many times that people have just started, like I said, just not really letting themselves get hurt. And I just want to say at this level of the game, that's kind of the deal where like you are competing for big trophies. You are you you are basically risking this like an entire season being quote unquote for nothing, right? I don't necessarily believe seasons are like that, but you are risking a season ending with no silverware and risking the heartbreak that comes with it every single season, right? Multiple times. So I think people just kind of want to find a way to emotionally hide behind the couch until the monster has been slain, and then they can pop out and enjoy the celebrations and not had to have potentially gone through this whole ordeal emotional roller coaster ride for nothing. So um yeah, I don't know, that's just kind of my take on it. But let's talk about the game. So yeah, like you said, John, we kicked off and we were really nervous right from the start, and PSG just dominated, came at us, took 4 minutes for Dembele to put the ball in the back of the net. And of course, that's after kind of an opening few minutes where Kavicha Kvaratskhelia just had the beating of Urian Timber over and over and over. So I kind of want to toss this out to you first, John.
Hmm.
Do you think there was an individual error of some sort, or was there someone culpable for that goal, or do you think it was just an immense finish from Dembele?
So first of all, it was an immense finish from Dembele, and I don't know if those two things are necessarily mutually exclusive. I think it still takes a great shot to beat a keeper like David Raya, but I don't think Declan Rice did himself any favors with how he approached defending that goal. Um, and to his credit, I think the lack of possession that we had and the lack of control over the midfield seemed, at least in my opinion, seemed to be, especially with Thomas Partey missing, in part caused by the fact that Rice and Marino seem to have to drop deep in those first 15 minutes and almost act like a pivot in the midfield. And clearly that's not something that we're used to doing. So I think there was a lack of comfort when you add that with this big event and this big night and all the pressure leading up to it. I think all of those were factors in that first goal. But I don't want to take it away from the finish because Dembele is a player who's absolutely on fire. And he showed exactly why he's what is it, 45 goals and assists now this season across all comps or something insane like that. Yeah, whatever. Maybe the point is like that's an informed player. He's one of the informed players, and yeah, you can't make a mistake like that with a player like that. This is what happens at this level. It's not like it's not. We're not playing, all respect to like Crystal Palace or something like that, who can punish you as well. It's another caliber, and that's what you expect at this level of the competition. Yeah. You can't make mistakes, especially not with players like that.
With Palace, your keeper at least has to be 20 yards outside of goal for them to punish you. But,
right, exactly.
Drew, how about you? Do you think Rice was kind of culpable there, or do you think it's just one of those situations where the moment of skill really overshadowed the moment?
No, I think it's both, and usually at this level, when you're dealing with teams, as John said, that are as good as you or at minimum, if not better. Usually, when you give up goals, unless it's such a glaring error by an individual player, usually you give up goals as a collective. So I feel like there was probably a bit of collective responsibility as well surrounding that too. Just like the amount of space that Dembele had at the top of the box, that's just not down to a single player. Right? It can be, sure, but usually that someone could have probably seen that space and stepped in. Even if Rice didn't, someone else could have, and no one else did. So that to me is a collective problem. One thing I kind of wanted to highlight is that I do feel like I kind of mentioned before that we could have taken some lessons from Real Madrid, and I think in this case we also could have, because I feel like a semifinal is massive for the club at the Emirates as well. There's no denying that. But I feel like there was an air of like even the club was kind of giving off like an energy of like we're so surprised to be here. It stopped being a business as usual match for us. And even though it's a semifinal, it still should be business as usual. And I feel like the occasion maybe got to a lot of the players early doors. So they're only trying to hype the team up, but I feel like we overdid it. I am not so sure that didn't have an effect on some of the players. Not maybe all the players, but some of them. And unfortunately, like when you're missing a veteran calming presence like Thomas Partey, that could have maybe made a difference as well. It's just I don't know. I feel like it's tricky for me. Like you see that we grew into the match and settled down, right? But usually, like we didn't. I don't think we had nearly the same response against Real Madrid, who are a bigger, better, more historic club than PSG. We responded better earlier against them, even at the Bernabeu, than we did against PSG. So for me, that tells me there was another mental component that was missing. And once we finally shook that off, it was more of an example of closer to where we could be. But I do feel like for the second leg and a underratedly hostile environment going to the Parc des Princes, like PSG fans are nuts. They have great ultras, they have great home support. It's going to be as raucous as the Bernabeu. I do think the players have to just go out there and think of it as a 0-0 kind of thing and take it from there, one goal at a time, instead of trying to look too forward. You know, and at this level, at this deep in the competition, as difficult as Champions League is, mentality is really important. And this goes back to something that I always remember, where Luis Enrique was having that conversation with Mbappe before he went to Real Madrid, talking about mentality, how you approach things. And I think he did a brilliant job preparing them for this. We had our own issues in the match, but PSG were very, 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 very good. And it shows that they're such a much better collective than Real are, despite Real having bigger names overall. PSG are a better team, and it's going to take something extra from us to go in and get a reversal result. So, yeah, going back to the original question, like I said again, I think it's more of a collective problem. But when there's a collective problem, there are collective solutions. So I'm not particularly worried about it. It's just we have to be at our absolute best to reverse it. So.
No, I mean, I think that's right. I think Rice did kind of get a little naively sucked in towards Kavicha on our right side to help Timber deal with him. And if I had to guess, I think he probably expected someone like Marino to kind of drop in to the top of the box and sit on Dembele a little bit. And obviously that didn't happen. But to this point about maybe overhyping the match a little bit, are you and I'm not asking this accusatorily, these are just the words I'm using. Are you kind of insinuating that maybe the whole Arteta, like that one video of Arteta saying, you know, bring your kits, bring your boots, and kind of like the efforts that the club media went to kind of create like this vibe around the match, do you think that maybe backfired a little bit?
I think it backfired, but it backfired and that's on the fans. I don't feel like there's anything wrong with your manager trying to be very positive and openly supportive and asking for the fans to show up. I think that's fine. But I think like a lot of it probably could have been too much. And I do think the fans themselves didn't show up. And I think part of that goes back to the mentality we were talking about before, where PSG score early and you could then hear a pin drop at the Emirates for the next 15 minutes. And you'll see it with other clubs. If their club goes down early, the fans get louder to try to elevate the mood and elevate the level again. And instead, our fans, I think, immediately turtled and went to the, oh, here we go again. I don't want to get my heart broken again kind of thing. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And that's kind of the difference. It doesn't mean that Arsenal isn't a big club. It's that the fans have to understand that, like, I do think fans sometimes forget that when we play really, really well to get to this point, the other three teams that got to this point all played really, really well to get here. And you're coming up against teams that can beat you. And I do think the Real Madrid result, which was brilliant, and we all know that, I do think it kind of blinded some fans to the reality of how good PSG are or can be, and the task that is at hand. And maybe the club's efforts are trying to alleviate that a little bit and counterbalance it. And there's nothing wrong with like a hype machine per se, but again, I just felt like there was like I said, just to me, it just feels like people forgot that it just has to be like a business as usual kind of thing. Like this, if we made the final, I think that hype machine would have been totally justified. You know what I mean? But for a semifinal, like it's great, but it's also still just a semifinal. There's still at least 2 legs to go, minimum, and if not, then the final if you get through. So yeah, it's a weird kind of like 50-50 gray area for me, if you know what I mean. So
No, I get that. John, what are you laughing at over there?
I was just when you said that, and it just made me think of like what I first thought of when Arteta said that, like bring your boots, bring your shin pads. I was like, yeah, does anyone play DM? We need somebody. It's like, where's he going with this?
Oh my god.
Bring your shin pads. You know, Saka's played a lot of football and he just got off injury. Who could play on the right wing? Like, yeah. So that was what I was laughing at.
There were a lot of teenagers on that bench. I tell you what,
there were, and which I guess we could talk about like Nwaneri and like the amount of time he got to play, which I think may have, I don't know, but yeah, there were a lot of teenagers on that bench. So I thought it was I agree with Drew on the comments though. I think that I like the hype, but I think that it may have been done in kind of, I don't want to call it tone deaf, but I think that it was not the correct, it wasn't the correct approach, the rhetorical approach that we should have taken towards this game. Like I'm not a PR expert here, but I feel like something like 2 more to go, or like something like that, or 3 more to go. That feels like a better mentality than hyping this one up. Rather just be like, all right, let's go on to the next one, and the next one, and the next one. That feels like it would have, Again, though, I don't know how much that actually impacts things, but I think there is just a nervousness that permeated from the fans to the players a little bit. I can't imagine that it didn't, and we know because we hear from pro players, ex-pros all the time that the vibes in the stadium impact the way that you approach the games and that you play on the day sometimes. With that being said, however, our team does like it when everyone is against them, more so than I feel like that hypes them up, because we remember there was like that really long run of away wins that we had. It seems like this team responds well to that kind of an atmosphere. And I feel like they'll respond better. Hopefully, knock on wood, I hope they'll respond better to that kind of an atmosphere than they would a flat home atmosphere, which is what it felt like, at least from the TV.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly wouldn't be surprised if they played better in Paris just because of where they are. Yeah, and I'm with Drew where I had, and look, I say this as a guy who's on the other side of the pond. I don't get to go to the Emirates all that often, right? So, people might not take this kindly, but like, I had a problem with how a lot of people kind of conducted themselves at the match yesterday. And like, I know people who were there, and I heard firsthand accounts about how the atmosphere kind of sucked. And look, I get it. The club went to this big effort to hype up the match, and then they basically superimposed a giant cannon on top of a banner and called that a tifo. Right, like they just took the logo and put that on the tifo, and that was the end of it. After rejecting designs, and I'm sure that pisses people off, and that kind of lowers people's investment. But there's this line going around about how like, oh, of course you could hear a pin drop in the Emirates. They scored early, and it's like, okay, cool. Well, we just watched Barcelona go 2-0 down at Inter at home, and the Camp Nou got even louder after that, right? And what happened? 3-3. They saved the game, right? That could have been tie over for them, but the crowd got behind them, and they managed to take something out of that game. And I mean, like, can you imagine being an Arsenal player where like this is such a big occasion, and because you had a whoops-a-daisy in the opening 5 minutes, there's just 50,000 people just standing there like this. Well, go on then. Give us something to cheer about. Like, that's so. Like, what's I'm forgetting the word for it, but that's so demanding. That's so spoiled. Like you have to get behind the team. You're supposed to be the 12th man. All right, 12th man doesn't get to just sit there and be like, oh well, You guys get me into the game. No, you're supposed to be there with them. That's the whole point of a home advantage.
It's entitlement, I think, is the word you're looking for.
That's the word. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was laughing because when you were talking about the Tifo, have you ever seen Spinal Tap where like they lower this little tiny Stonehenge and like have you ever seen that movie?
No, I've never seen
No.
it.
Great. It's a mockumentary. It's like a mockumentary like about this like fake rock band called Spinal Tap, and they had made that one of the songs that they do is called Stonehenge, and they were supposed to lower this giant Stonehenge monument on the stage, and they had mixed up inches and feet, so they lower this so they're all playing, and like there's this tiny, they're trying to like build this atmosphere, and this tiny Stonehenge monument plays, and they're going what. So that's when I saw that Tifo going up. It was obviously it was big, but it was kind of like, what is that? Like.
I let myself get so excited about because I saw a report that was like Arsenal are going with cannon design for the Tifo, and I was like, oh, cool! They're gonna have this giant cannon pointed right at the field, and you're gonna have like Arteta and Saka and Odegaard staying behind it, like ready to light the fuse, and then it was just the crest, and it was like, okay.
Yeah, I almost was I was expecting to see like a QR code that like links you to the Arsenal Direct store or something.
I just it seemed more like it was product placement than actual club support, which is two very different things. And
right, totally.
So frustrating.
And so, it was disappointing, and I get it. I get how people might have seen that and been like, "Oh, I'm not sure if I'm, gonna get behind the team today." But you gotta. Like you have to, because there are some situations where the team needs to feel like their fans are there for them and they're behind them, and the mental boost that gives is just unquantifiable. So, that was disappointing, and obviously the opening 25 minutes wasn't great. But kind of before we talk about how we bounced back from that, and you guys have both kind of alluded to this, our midfield configuration was a little different than we like it to be this season. That's because Thomas Partey went and got himself, just so boneheaded, man. Anyway, I don't want to go on a second rant today, but so Partey wasn't in the home leg, so we had to play Rice at 6, and we had to play Marino left 8 and Odegaard right 8, which isn't bad, right? But I just think it was the first time in a while they had to do that. And Odegaard's had problems of his own that we'll get to, and I think Rice has kind of shown that he might be a better left 8 in these games than a 6. That's not to say he was bad at 6 at all. I just think his qualities make him more dangerous at the left 8 position. But yeah, obviously there was that bit of disjointment, and I think we were missing kind of Partey's distribution from in front of the back four. So Drew, I'll go to you first. Just kind of. How badly do you think we miss Partey, and how much of a chance does having him back for the home leg give us?
I mean, I hate to say, but we did miss him quite a bit. But for me, it wasn't just the midfield balance that was off. It was the whole spine. When you remove what the trouble that Moreno could have given PSG as a 9 over Trossard, that was also a huge miss for us as well. Yeah. And when you're missing two key components of the way your entire spine is set up, that's going to cause any kind of adverse effect to what you're trying to achieve. And it's not a knock on Trossard, but yeah, he's just not good enough to lead the line as a forward against PSG. He just isn't. And it's so weird to say that about Moreno, because he's done such a good job as a 9 to miss that dynamic that he brings, and how that correlates to how other people perform through passage of play and through build up and chance creation in the final third. I think that was also evident early on as well. But and he's just a different player when he plays as a left 8, when he plays for us as a 9. I think there's two different tasks involved. So, and also the residual knock-on effect of having Partey there, I think, caused other performances to drop. Rice being one of them. I don't think Rice was at his best. Odegaard was not at his best. I think that's why one of Odegaard's worst performances this season.
Yeah.
And I do think when you're missing such a key midfield piece, it does have a knock-on effect to other players. And that's just the reality when you build tactics out. So yeah, I think it was massive. I think we'll definitely see the influence when he is there. And also moving forward, why we're trying to long-term upgrade on that position as well, because it's of vital importance to the way we play. So, and for the time being, when we have Partey in, when he's the best version of himself, he's an excellent footballer, and he helps make us tick. And when you remove that, it's the same as if you remove, Kai Havertz from center forward, or when you remove Bukayo Saka from the right wing. It's he's become that important this season. So I think it definitely got us off, a little bit off our game. It showed early as well. Again, that leadership, the calming presence of veterans, and this is kind of why I tell fans when you're looking at like summer transfers, why we can't just go after 22-year-olds. You need veteran presence who have experience. I do think we actually missed that from him too. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think we've missed Kai Havertz for so long, but that's a conversation for another day. Yeah, I mean, I think the Marino point is an excellent one because, like you said, he's proven to be such a critical part of how we play these days. Where if he's not available, or if he's forced to play elsewhere outside of that number 9 position, it really just does mess up our flow a little bit. And Trossard doesn't have the physical capabilities to serve as that fulcrum, that focal point in our offense, the way that we like the number 9 to. But John, what did you make of Arsenal and Partey's absence? And do you kind of agree with Drew here about the kind of the knock-on effect that him not
Yeah,
being there had?
yeah, absolutely. And I kind of alluded to it earlier. I think one of the effects of not having Partey in the midfield was that we saw Rice and Marino drop down deeper, especially in the first 20 minutes. And I think that it kind of allowed a lot of space for PSG to operate in the midfield and build up through, which is what we kind of saw in that first goal. And it's... It, it's one of those situations where obviously you need to adapt if you're missing one of the key players, but it's hard to fault to an extent because when you add the nature of the occasion, the build up to it, the nerves and everything like that, and now you have a situation where you're playing in a formation that you might not be as comfortable with. Of course, you're going to have some miscommunications potentially. Of course, you're not going to be working at an optimal level, and that you're not going to be creating. You're allowing space in ways that is not going to be ideal for what you're trying to do and control a game, which is what you have to do against a team like PSG. So, look, Partey absolutely was missed in this one, and I 100% agree with Drew that if you want evidence of why we need a player like that, or at least an upgrade on that, because we've been very vocal about Partey's shortcomings on here, and they do exist, and they are still there even when he's not there. But what he does offer to the team, I don't think that there is an analog to that currently. Jorginho just doesn't do it, and then Rice and Marino dropping down can't do it, at least not on such short notice. Maybe over a period of a longer progression of games that we could see that develop a little bit better. But when it's an ad hoc kind of change that's coming from week to week, I don't think that they have the solidity and the understanding of that formation based off of not doing it as much to kind of do that in a way that you need to at this level. So yeah, hopefully that is literally just plug and play next week, right? Hopefully that just changes the complexion of the midfield and the ability to control the game. With that being said, it is, as the game went on, it did settle down and we did control it more, which I think is a testament to kind of what I've been saying here, is that it might have been a nerves thing and an unfamiliarity with it. And then once that goal went in, it was okay, all hands on deck, let's get this down. And then we saw that improve a little bit. So as far as ad hoc midfields go, to only be 1-0 down, and when it's not your night, we've seen nights where it was not our night that have gone a lot worse than that did. So, yeah, we missed Partey, but I think that we did what we had to do, and could have been worse, could have been better, sure, but we got to deal with what we have.
Yeah, and like again, it's not that midfield trio that we had to play against PSG. It's not a bad one. It's just the problem is, you need that little readjustment period, and it's very hard to have a peaceful readjustment period when Kvaratskhelia is, just going at Timber, and then you have Desiree Doué, on Miles Lewis-Skelly, and then Dembele is kind of switching between flanks, and then he's rotating with players and playing false nine, and he's volleying, and then you have, Vitina and Joao Pedro and what's his face? What's the name of that the other Spanish midfielder they have?
I believe
Doesn't
it's
matter.
what's his face. I believe that's his name.
Fabian Ruiz, and you have
Fabian what's his face.
Fabian what's his face Ruiz. And so you have, Neves and what's his face Ruiz and Vitinho all just doing this, all doing their thing, and like it's just it's the worst possible time to have to readjust. And so again, it wasn't a bad configuration. It's just, having Party there, I think, would have eased things a little bit. But in terms of being a little off, let's talk about the elephant in the room. And that, unfortunately, is the captain, Martin Odegaard. I just want to read a couple stats that he had from the game really quickly. 0.08 expected assists, 0 of 3 successful crosses, no long balls attempted. I honestly, I'm not really bothered about that one. 0 shots on target, 0 shots attempted. 5 of 6 dribbles failed. 14 times possession was lost. 6 of 8 ground duels lost. I agree with what Drew said earlier, where I think this is definitely like a bottom 3 game that I've ever seen from Odegaard. It was horrendous. He felt like a passenger at times. I think for me, the way that I really, because obviously he's been bad. He not bad, but he has been bad. Obviously, he's been off
Relatively bad.
Yeah, relatively bad for so long that we've come to kind of expect this a little bit. But I think the thing that really got me yesterday was kind of the number of times where Saka would get the ball on the right flank, and normally you're so used to Odegaard being right there, right, just to be an option for him, and I just don't recall Odegaard getting out quickly to him as often as he did. It felt like Saka was really on an island a lot of the time, and that's just not how that right flank is supposed to work. I think he looked tired. He looked gaunt. He looked like Sirius Black in Order of the Phoenix, that bad. It was just, really terrible. And like, he didn't deal with the midfield physical battle all that well. And this is not a physical midfield that we were up against. And he was just a non-factor. So, John, I know you have to take off in a few minutes, so I'll go to you first here. Just what did you make of Odegaard's performance? And honestly, what would you do at this point? Would you bench him for someone, or would you change things up to avoid playing him? Like, how would you go about addressing the Odegaard problem?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. First of all, your team is a reflection of your captain, and you're especially the younger players. You're looking to Odegaard. You're looking at also players like Rice and Saka as well, but you're looking to your captain to kind of set the standard for what you're going to do on the night. And I think that Odegaard has this tendency he can be very fiery, and then sometimes it feels like he can just fall and disappear in games. And it's something he needs to work on, because unfortunately, you're the on-field captain. You need to be the one setting the standard. You need to be the one that's on it, and that's a lot of pressure. I understand, and I think that there's this underlying view that I have with respect to this whole match, that I do feel the pressure of this game got to these players and to the fans, and I think they kind of fed off each other in that regard. But with Odegaard, at least, how do you fix it? Well, actually, let me just kind of put a bow on that. I think that there was a nerves aspect of it, and I don't think Odegaard not taking command of this game did anything to help that. I think if anything, it hurt. It hurt us. And with respect to what you do, I wouldn't bench him. I wouldn't do anything like that. He just needs to step up. We know that he's talented. I don't know. The only way I'd say bench him or something like that is if the physios are looking at him and he's in the red, and he's we know that we're not going to get a good game from him physically because of where he is. If he can play physically, he just needs to get in the game and take control of it. All right. And I think that's kind of systemic with Odegaard. And a good example of that kind of evidences this I guess, anemia sometimes that we see with him is what he does in front of goal sometimes. And obviously he had that purple patch before with last season. I think it was last season or the season before, whichever one that he was scoring quite a bit. And a lot from outside the box too. It was like those rolling ones that he put in the corners.
Yeah.
We don't really see him attempt that anymore. But even then, like that anemia that we see from him or reluctance to shoot. There's been times where he's been in great positions and he'll either take too long or he'll mess a shot up or he'll just try to put it on another foot or pass it off. And you're kind of getting so frustrated with him because, if he was just had a little bit more venom in front of goal, I think that he is in such dangerous positions sometimes. And that's kind of an ongoing criticism I have of Odegaard. But with respect to what he needs to do, he needs to overcome whatever is that we saw from him in that last game. I don't know. Maybe he wasn't feeling good. I don't know. I don't really know. It does look like it was the worst of a trend downwards that we've seen from him. So hopefully that's kind of a rock bottom because there's not much lower you can get than that. I say that now.
It can always get worse.
You're right. It could always get worse, but I feel like it would be very hard to get worse than what we saw against PSG from Odegaard. So at least there's that, right? So if let's say everything else is equal, at least probably Odegaard's going to play a little better next week. I hope. So there's that. That's maybe a silver lining.
Yeah. Hopefully there's only one way to go, but up.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, also, you're talking about his reluctance to take shots. I think just his reluctance to turn and face goal generally. I feel like he gets the ball a lot where he has options to, pass it or carry it forward, and he just turns back towards the defense. And I think that's kind of indicative of where he is maybe mentally as well as physically. But Drew, I want to bring you in on this. What do you make of the Odegaard situation? And bye, John. That was John. You can follow him on Twitter at 305cast and on Blue Sky at Yellow Ribbons. So thanks, John.
You all.
So, Drew, what would you do about the Odegaard situation and just, kind of like I asked John, would you bench him? Would you, kind of maybe try bringing in Winery or reconfigure the midfield some other way, or is this just something like John said that Odegaard's going to have to play through?
No, I think you played him through it. And I guess if I'm Arteta, I'd probably sit him down and have a conversation about like levels and expectations and then honest assessment of himself, because as much as players want to play, a lot of times players can also be honest about where they're at. And if he kind of discloses that with Arteta about where he's at, either physically or mentally or both, then maybe the manager gets to make a decision. I mean, it's obviously not an excuse per se, but I do. One of the things I would say is I do kind of feel like I just kind of feel like he's probably struggling mentally at this point. And I know that a lot of fans always forget that footballers are people. But I think it's clear he's still dealing with injury struggles to some degree. I mean, I think it's been made pretty clear just by the level of his performances, the way he looks. That can mess with your mentals, but I also kind of feel like fans don't quite understand the amount, at least those that don't have a way of understanding how it can be such a toll on your mental and physical state when you become a parent. And I'm not trying to necessarily make excuses, but I've seen other Arsenal fans try to mention that, and people that are parents, when you're going through the first few months of being a parent, you don't sleep.
Yeah,
it's constantly stressful. Even with assistance, if they're getting assistance from family or friends, it's still a lot. And I think it's just all culminated at the wrong, the mental issue with dealing with what I think he's dealing with, which is the niggling injury issue. Plus, you have dealing with a newborn and all of the mental stress that comes with. And it's just kind of at the wrong time.
And also, there's postpartum depression. Not saying that that's something he's dealing with, but that's something that happens. We
Yeah.
don't know the health of the child.
Mhm.
Maybe there's something going on there. And again, I'm not trying to assume. I'm not trying
No,
to
but
speak
there are
as
things that we can consider that are causing
yeah.
his dip because, I mean, as Tom alluded to in the last show, this is a player who won Player of the Year 2 years running.
Yeah.
Prior. So we know what he's capable of. And I do also feel like fans, for some strange reason, just don't feel like players are allowed to have a down season. Even if there was no injury concern, even if there was no discussion about like his personal life in terms of being a parent now or whatever, players are allowed to have a down season. Like it happens. Like even like again, even Messi was not at his best when he was at PSG. It doesn't mean he wasn't Lionel Messi. I'm obviously not comparing the level of Messi and Odegaard. It's more of even the best players possible sometimes will be off of it for however long of a period of time. Lautaro Martinez, for the first half of the season, was a shadow of himself at Inter. And a lot of people were asking, what happened to him? Where is this? He had something like 5 league goals, I think, by the midway point. I think it was. I'm sorry, I can't remember.
And
Also,
now he's gone down injured,
yeah,
and Inter fans would they would probably be right to feel like their chances of beating Barcelona in the semifinals just went down a little bit.
yeah, because at the end of the day, he's still Lautaro Martinez. He's still capable of ludicrous feats on the football pitch when he's at his best. And I do think Odegaard is in that same conversation about when he's at his best. He's such a good player.
Yeah.
So I think you have to start him. I think you have to play him through. I think Arteta probably does have to have a one-on-one, like not about coming down on him and dropping the hammer. It's just more of like, tell me where you're at. How can we get you through this period? Like, how can we support you? Like, whatever it might be. And I'm sure they've probably had that conversation already because knowing how Arteta is and the culture of the club behind closed doors, I'd be shocked if they didn't have that conversation already, or if or a similar one. I wouldn't change much. I would go with the 11 we would expect. Once now that Partey is back, I'd go Partey at 6, Rice, Odegaard, midfield, Moreno at center forward, the same wingers, the same back four. I don't think we have to change much. I think it's just more of we have to bring up the level that we can bring, and we just didn't bring it against PSG early enough. But as the game went on, the collective kind of improved. But I do think most players were off of it. So I do think it's, and again, I get angry when fans find any reason to scapegoat because now all of a sudden you've got people DMing Odegaard saying, "Get out of my club, you're useless." Go back to the mountains of Norway. I'm just like, this shit is not. That to me is just like if the club is at its highest point in Europe for however many years, and your response to a 1-0 loss is to start DMing players, like. If you're 15 years old or 45 years old, I don't give a shit. Like, please act your age. Like, be mature about it. Like, this is like, and this goes back to the entitlement we were talking about before. It's just not warranted. Like, as a fan, even when you're frustrated the most, you're meant to get behind the players, behind the club.
Yeah.
But so many fans just for whatever it's for social media clicks or to make themselves feel better about themselves because they're unhappy in life. Like, the default response is to go harass other people. Who they would never like that person would never say that to Odegaard's face. Of course not, because like you're just being cowardly. And it's just like, yeah, we can all rightly be upset and frustrated and annoyed about various aspects of the result, but it's hardly over yet. Do you know what I mean? So it's just, yeah. So
the thing with like messaging players, right? Like I would love to sit this guy down and be like, let's talk this out. Right. So you message Odegaard and you say these things to him. What happens next? It's one of two things. One, and this is the far less likely scenario, he's like, "You're right. I'm going to tear up my contract and leave." Okay, first of all, that's not happening. Second, now we're out a player heading into the end of the season. So, hooray, I guess that helped.
yeah.
Secondly, and this is what's going to happen 99.99999% of the time, you are going to chip away further at that player's self-esteem if they see that message, right? And it's not going to help.
Do. Players have already said they see these, they read these things.
Yeah.
Players are humans. They will get on their phones, the ones that run their own social media, because some players don't. they will get on their phones and they will read these messages, and they have alluded to the fact that it does great on their own confidence in certain ways, because in any it doesn't matter that you're a professional footballer getting paid however much many million pounds a season. You're still a human being, and I hate to say this, but all these players are much younger than I am. So like they're like so many of them aren't even like they don't even have fully developed frontal cortexes yet. Do you know what I mean? They're not, like Odegaard's not even 30 yet. He's still, in the grand scheme of life, he's still young. Well, all these players are still young in the grand scheme of how life pans out, right? So it just, I didn't mean to interrupt, but it just blows my mind that that's the immediate response. Is it just, and that's the only DMs that we know about. That one particular example I was citing. I'm sure there's been others, so.
Yeah. For sure. And, I mean, I think back to Kai Havertz, where after the United game, people were telling his wife that they hope their child dies through miscarriage, or someone breaks into their house and kill. That's not going to help. Like, just taking aside like just the disgusting lack of humanity, that's not going to help them. That's not the kick up their backside that they need. That's going to make them go into training and get on and go on the pitch and play worse, right? Because now there's fear, now there's less self-esteem, now there's more doubt. People don't play better when they feel those things.
Right.
So I just think, again, aside from just the reprehensible behavior, that kind of thing it's not having the impact that you think it's going to have. Yeah, I just think the whole thing's dumb. In terms of Odegaard himself, here's the thing, right? I would bench him, but that's not. But like, if we had a full squad, and we don't have that right now. Like if we had Havertz and Jesus, and when Party's back from suspension, like, and I could sit Odegaard down on the bench, and of course do it gently and be like, hey man, I don't think you're at 100%. I'm gonna give you a little bit of time to get back to, just kind of feel like yourself again, to, shake it off. So I'm gonna give you the bench. Party's gonna start at 6, and then Rice is gonna start left 8. I'll throw in Marino at right 8. Maybe you swap Rice and Marino around if you feel so, and then put Havertz at center forward, or Jesus at center forward, or whatever, right? Right now, we don't have the pieces to do all that. I mean, hell, even if Calafiore was back, I would maybe contemplate moving Rice to right 8 and then moving Lewis Skelly to left 8 and playing Calafiore at left back. But like, we don't even have that, right? So Odegaard has to play, because I don't think Nwaneri is at a point yet where he can just go and take over for Odegaard in these massive games, right? I think this season has kind of been a really interesting case study in the differences in how players develop, because you see Lewis Skelly, who, we're probably not going to have enough time to really talk about today, but he had a phenomenal game. And then you see Nwaneri, who's still an amazing talent, right? Still a top tier elite talent, but it's just taking him that little extra time to get to, this level of the game. So
I mean, it's down to minutes, and this is the point. This is why I always tell people that when you go after like younger players, you can hamper their development. If you bring a young player and you don't play them, their development will stall. And I'm not saying that Nwaneri's development will stall, because he's still very young. But in the case of Lewis Skelly, the reason why he's now like in conversations of starting for England as their primary left back, and why he's our primary left back, and why he's hitting these performance levels, is because he's playing every week. You don't do what Lewis Skelly would not be playing this well consistently every week if he wasn't playing every week. If he was getting the same minutes that Nwaneri was getting, we wouldn't see these same performances consistently, or to that level.
Yeah.
So I think it just kind of shows that, every player's pathway will be different. And if Saka was out for the rest of the season and Nwaneri was playing, we might see a similar trajectory from him as well. It's possible. I don't know that, because we're not in that scenario. But I do agree with you. I don't think you can just throw Nwaneri in now bench Odegaard for Nwaneri and expect us to perform better.
Yeah.
I don't see it personally.
I maybe would have subbed Nwaneri on 10 to 15 minutes sooner than Arteta
Sure,
did.
that I agree with. Yeah.
Yeah, but
Mhm.
like he's not ready for a Champions League semifinal, and that's
No.
okay. That's okay,
Yeah, that's
really.
totally
But like,
okay.
yeah.
He's not
So
Lamine Yamal. You know what I mean? Like, and
exactly,
very few players are
dude.
ever.
That
So
that goal against Inter.
I don't want to get
What
into
the
another match. I'm gonna get
what?
so annoyed because I mean I was watching. I wasn't working today, but I was watching the match, and I was just like, and I tweeted, I was like, "This is peak Champions League." Like that whole match was so entertaining on so many different talking points, and the goals were from like all. There were so many nice goals as well. Like, and yeah, and I do kind of feel like it would be nice to have a player like that because I do think like Saka is and Yamal are very different players.
Yeah,
I do think Saka's world class. That's not up for debate for me. But like Jamal is like he's. I would be shocked if he doesn't become the youngest Ballon d'Or winner in history on evidence, like of how good he is already as a 17-year-old.
I was talking to my dad today, and he was like, I finally watched Lamine Yamal, and I think he's pretty good. I was like, Dad, I think he's the best player in the world. He was like, No, no, and I was just like, he
There's a
might
shout
be.
for it. Top five, top five for sure. On current evidence, you can't say that at least for this season, he's not one of the top 5 players on the planet currently.
For sure. He's
On
he's
form.
making that podium.
Yeah,
He's
I
at the
think.
very least.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a phenomenal player. But this is a really good segue to kind of the next thing I wanted to talk about here, which is we did create chances,
Mhm.
right? And kind of what my takeaway from the Inter Barcelona match, right, was Barcelona kind of had the same start that we did, right? They got punched in the mouth very quickly and they scrambled a bit. They didn't know what to do. This is not a situation that they wanted to be in, right? And they took a second goal. They went a second goal behind, but the difference between us and Barcelona in our respective matches was Barcelona had the quality to get the ball to their best player, but also they had other players in that team who were just as well, not just as threatening, but they were threatening enough to demand their own attention and allow that best player to do their work. And with us, we didn't. And we created chances too, but PSG made it very clear that Saka was the guy that they didn't want the ball to get to. If they were okay with Trossard and Martinelli having it. And both those guys had huge chances to change the outcome of the game, and they didn't do it. Martinelli got played in by a really wonderful ball from Lewis Skelly in on goal. Yes, it was at a bit of an angle. I think he didn't set himself right before he took that shot. Yeah, that bad, huh?
He didn't. I agree that he didn't set himself, but even still, like sometimes I feel like sometimes players want to go for the flashy finish of bending it far post. He could have smacked that near post, and that's still a hard save for Donnarumma to try to make.
Yeah.
There's other options there. I personally feel like he should probably score that. And I had I forget who I was speaking to on Twitter about it real time. And I largely agree with the point is that if you give that chance to that same kind of run trajectory, the ball, but on the opposite flank and it's Saka, he's probably scoring that with power. And if you give that to Dembele, he's probably scoring it. If you give that to Due, he's probably scoring it. If you give that to Yamal, he's probably scoring that. And I do feel like that's part of the reason. And I think you even like the tweet when I said it, that's kind of one of those fine margin differences where as much as I rate Martinelli, a player who is a more polished version of that kind of left side to winger in the final third probably scores it. And that's also the kind of chance you have to take in a Champions League semifinal. Where like if we score that goal, the tie could be very, very, very different, even just across those 90 minutes. And I want to bring back to something you had said where where like PSG and Barcelona, like, well, they have multiple players that you have to pay attention to. This goes back to my conversation about A, well, why we miss Kai Havertz, but also B, why I think the club are so adamant about going after bigger attacking profiles, because you can't, like, if you want to focus on Saka, and I don't want to bring up the conversation overall, but it's a point to make that if you focus so many of your efforts trying to shut down Saka, and you had a Gyökeres in the team,
Yeah.
you have another player, you have another really big goal threat to focus on. Or if your front three is Saka, Gyökeres, and just say it's Nico Williams, there's three players you have to actually focus your defensive strategy on, not just one. And that's kind of one of those things where if you look at Michael Jordan's career, if you want to, like, a basketball reference, Michael Jordan on the Bulls, you couldn't just say take the ball out of Jordan's hand because you had Scottie Pippen there, you had whoever else. But when he was on, like, the Wizards, it's a very different conversation. Do you know what I mean? Like, it'd be more easily to focus on shutting down on Michael Jordan on the Wizards than it was on Michael Jordan on the Bulls. And it helps both just that player, but also the other players too, when you have multiple threats. So yeah, I agree with you. I just think where we're at currently, it does show why we're still trying to improve certain things. That 1 or 2% more difference makers. And I also do think, I kind of feel like PSG did, and we talk about Odegaard not playing well, but I think they also did a good job shutting him down. And I don't think I do think they deserve some credit because they did perform across the board pretty well defensively. Yeah, we had a greater XG than them, only barely. A lot of that XG came from 1 or 2 of our chances, though. So I think PSG deserve a lot of credit because we really don't have that many big attacking threats. With no Havertz there, with Martinelli just being so hot and cold, Moreno not at center forward anymore, it's very easy to shut down 1 or 2 players. So, yeah.
Yeah. And, I think, again, this is a problem with recruitment. It's a problem with injuries, where we're going into this game not having the offensive threats to really, again, command that attention. And, I think more disappointing than the Martinelli chance was the Trossard chance for me, because with Trossard, you had him running in on goal from a similar angle. Vitinha was running after him, but he wasn't going to catch him before Trossard got the shot off. I don't understand why Trossard took the shot on his left foot as opposed to his right with that angle, because his right, I just feel like he put the ball a little bit too much in Donnarumma's reach unnecessarily. And it's not like Vitinha was going to get to him. It's not like he had to, take the shot on his left so that Vitinha wouldn't be able to swipe it off him. He had the space and the time to take it on his right. So I don't understand why he did that. He made the shot harder for himself. He made it easier for Donnarumma to save. And I think that was a pretty big miss. But, yeah, it's just we don't have Rafinha. We don't have, Lewandowski.
Ferran Torres, who still plays quite well as a deputy center forward, like those we don't have someone like that we can call on the bench, really.
Yeah.
So yeah,
and that's why for me, right? And I don't mean this to sound defeatist, right? But if we go to Paris and we don't pull off the result that we need, I'm still pretty happy with how we've done this season.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, just because
I would, if you have told me with what we just went through, we would still make a Champions League semifinal, I would have probably bitten your hand off for that, because it still shows the progress of where we're at, and it shows that even when under experimenting circumstances, we can still make a Champions League semifinal. It shows what we can do when we're at our best. So still finishing second place in the Premier League. Yes, it's 3 years in a row second place. You're still finishing runner-up 3 years running. That's still, for me, proof positive that you're still one of the top sides in the country, which is we would have begged for that in the late stage Wenger years. We would have begged for that under Unai Emery. So yeah, you have to kick on and get to the final, across the final hurdle. I agree, but to say that like the season's a wash if we don't make the Champions League semifinal that's a mind-blowing opinion to have when the club has not done anything historically to deserve that kind of egotistical way of looking at things. If you're a Real Madrid supporter or Barca or Bayern, maybe you can say that. Certainly for the first two. If you're Real or Barca, your whole goal is to win La Liga every season, win the Champions League every season, win Copa del Rey every season. Bayern have to win the Bundesliga every season, or else it's a bust. And I agree, because those are far and away the biggest teams in their league, and three of the top four biggest clubs in the world. So yeah, they earn that right to have that kind of, well, if we don't win this, season's a wash. I get it. But for us, no. I mean, come on.
But also, we lost 1-0 to PSG without Gabriel, without Party, without Jesus, without Havertz. Our attacking options on the bench were Ethan Nwaneri, Raheem Sterling, Nathan Butler-Oyedeji, Ismail Kabia, and, if you're really desperate, Kieran Tierney.
Right.
And we only lost by 1 goal.
Yeah.
And we arguably could have won that game.
Or at least come away with a draw.
Or at least come away with a draw.
Yeah. And I think if we ended up drawing 1-1, it would have been hard to say that we probably wouldn't have deserved it. Do you know what I mean? So, yeah, I don't think we would have stolen a draw. I think that match ended up pretty evenly, despite, the opening 4 or 5 minutes or whatever, or 15 minutes or whatever it was. So, yeah.
We came back into it really well. We realized that going long and just kind of playing to our physical strengths was the way to deal with it. And that's the thing, right? Kind of taking us into maybe a quick chat about the away leg before we get out of here. That's the thing that gives me hope, right? Because I think we were really making them uncomfortable. And the only reason that people don't feel that way, that people don't think that we had kind of gained an advantage over them, is the fact that our forwards did not show up in the critical moments. But we are winning the physical battle. Lewis Skelly and Rice and even Saliba were dribbling straight through them and giving them fits and creating these spaces to open up these chances. We had them on set pieces. If it wasn't for Marino's shoulder being offside, it's 1-1, right? And like we were playing with bravery. Jakub Kivior almost came away with an assist if it wasn't for an amazing Joao Neves tackle. We figured out how to play these guys, and I think even at the end of the match, Declan Rice went online and talked about how optimistic he was. Arteta was little smiley at the end of the game, right? Felt pretty good, and I didn't get the vibe of a team that came away from that match thinking to themselves, "Fuck, they're so much better than us." That's not how they felt. That they came away thinking we were right there. Another 15-20 minutes, we would have gotten something. Let's go again in a week and do what we did at the end of the match, and none of this bullshit that we did for the opening 25 minutes, 30 minutes, right? So I that combined with kind of what John hinted at earlier with the atmosphere and how this Arsenal team does play better away from home, which I do think there is a massive nugget of truth to. I feel like we're right there in it, and I don't think progressing to the final is off the table by any means.
No,
Like
I agree.
a lot of people seem to think it is. Yeah.
Yeah, I still think we're very much in it. I do think. I mean, it's going to take a big effort. Like I said, PSG are very difficult to deal with at Parc des Princes. Like they've got the momentum in their favor. So yeah, it's not over. Is it slightly more improbable? Yeah, I think the onus is on us to go and make the night ours, and with that comes an inherent amount of pressure, sure, but it doesn't mean it's impossible to do. It's just going to be, and let's be clear, if we do reverse it and make the final, that's also one of the biggest results we've had in however long. But I agree with John. I do think sometimes these players can elevate when their backs are against it, when we are kind of an underdog in a way. We've seen that before in some performances against City, where we absolutely smashed them and no one ever really expected us to. Real Madrid, same thing. No one gave us the hope and a prayer against Real Madrid, and look what we did. So a lot of self belief is needed, and getting Partey back will help. But again, I do think it's got to be like, just go in. It's 0-0. Don't worry about the first leg. Take it 0-0. Score the first goal. It's still 0-0. Just continue that way. So yeah.
And obviously, can't put a foot wrong for the next 90 minutes of this game, right? Like this has to be flawless.
Yeah, that's the best performance of the season, 100%.
Yeah, but I think these guys have it in them, and I would say right now that Rice and Lewis Skelly and Saka, those guys are coming away with good performances, no matter what. Those guys are making a good account of themselves, even if this is the end of the line. And it's up to the rest of the team to match that and to show that they're also able to step up in those situations. So we'll see what happens. Yeah, it's far from over. I think people, and this kind of goes back to this, to the atmosphere conversation and kind of the entitlement and how people felt going into the match. I think people forget that at this level of the game, anything can happen. Anything. And all you can really do is go out there and play your best and leave it all out on the pitch and hope the bounces go in your favor and make the critical moments count.
Yeah.
And that's it. And after that, what will be will be. And we're playing teams that can pull crazy moments out of thin air. And if we beat PSG, we'll go on to Inter or Barcelona, and look at what both those teams did today. So you just this is what you're up against at this level, and all the boo-hooing I'm seeing after a 1-0 loss to PSG, I think some people need to buck up a little bit, because this is the level that we're trying to be at for the foreseeable future.
It's not just that, but real quickly, I mean, PSG are a better side than we are. I don't care that they play in Liga. I don't care that they run the rule and they run the table habitually in France. They are a better team than we are currently.
I don't think that's a crazy thing to say.
I feel like they are. They're better at what they do. And so it's, but that doesn't mean we can't cause an upset. But I do think it's just some fans need some humbling too. But we do have to get out of here. But we'll see how it goes. But I do think we're still in it, and anything's possible. So
yeah. One last thing before we put a bow on this. We're playing Bournemouth on Saturday, and it's a tricky situation because we need to wrap up Champions League qualification, but we have this return leg on Wednesday. So just real quick, what lineup do you think we should go with?
I think we have to go strong, and I think you have to look at it as a confidence booster, and you just hope that no one gets injured. Thankfully, Bournemouth aren't the type of side to go out and be overtly physical to the point where you're having an elevated risk of injury. But there's some dynamics to the way Bournemouth play that you can compare to PSG as to where it would be a good run out for us to try to work out some kinks.
Yeah,
get good minutes into legs, and but I think we also cap minutes on certain players. I think you bring Saka off at 70 minutes max, no matter what the result is. I think you do the same thing with maybe someone like Rice or Odegaard if he starts or whoever it may be. But I do think we have to go strong. I do think we have to look for the win, because I do think bouncing back at the weekend and getting that result can definitely help us going into next midweek. I think that's really important to consider. So
yeah, I think I would make 3 or 4 changes. I think I'd start Partey, move Rice up to left 8.
Yeah,
I think I'd start White at right back just to get some minutes into him. And Timber seemed to go down with a cramp or something late in the match, so I just kind of let him put his feet up. I think you're right about starting Saka. Yeah, obviously take him off at 70ish minutes. I think I would start Winery against Bournemouth for Odegaard.
Okay.
Yeah, just because there's no way Odegaard isn't playing against PSG.
Sure. Yeah.
But so if I'm Arteta, I want to guarantee that he is as fresh as possible
That's fair.
for that game. And then outside of that, I mean, maybe Trossard for Martinelli, maybe. And then obviously Marino playing up top. But obviously, you don't, like you said, you want to go strong. You don't want to make that many changes, because I do think we are kind of hitting the point where if you don't win this, you have to beat Liverpool or Newcastle probably to really make sure that you finish second.
Yeah,
So
it's not that we can't beat Newcastle, but they have our number. I think Bournemouth is the one that you have to look at as we need 3 points for this. So yeah.
if we beat Bournemouth, lost to Liverpool and Newcastle, and then beat Southampton on the final day, I think that's enough.
I would probably agree with you on that. Yeah, just to be safe. But
yeah, I'm not sure that gets you second, but I think that keeps you.
At this point, we have to be okay with the fact that we might not finish second. I think it's just from a nutritional standpoint, But as long as we get Champions League qualification next year, I'm fine with us not finishing. If we finish third, so be it. You know what I mean? Like, it's whatever.
If we finish third, like, I can live with it. Like, just this fucking season, man.
Yeah, I think that we have to make some concessions somewhere because, again, this fucking season sums it up perfectly.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So we'll see what happens there. But I think that'll do it for today.
Yep.
So I'm Sham. You can follow me on Twitter at Shamsdale. That's John, who left 40 minutes ago, and I'm running on 4 hours of sleep.
Okay, I was like, I'm not John, but I know where he's going with this. Time to save it, Sham.
Oh, I told my wife I'd pick her up. I told my wife I'd pick her up at the train station like in an hour, and she might have to drive us back. But yeah, John, you can follow him on Twitter at 305cast and on Blue Sky at yellowribbons.bsky.social. This guy right here with me is Drew. You can follow on Twitter at GeecheeKid and on Blue Sky at supplyanddemandery.bsky.social. You can follow the pod at Not That Gooner on Twitter and notthatgooner.bsky.social on Blue Sky. You can subscribe to us on YouTube. Shouts to the new subscribers that we got in the last week. Thank you for joining. For those of you who haven't subscribed, we are at Not That Kind of Gooner on YouTube. We are at Not That Kind of Gooner on Instagram. If you're listening on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, please do leave us a 5-star review. It really does help out in terms of getting the pod more exposure and putting it out there towards more people. And yeah, I think that about covers it. So
shout out to Hooligan Soccer as well.
Oh yeah, shout out to Hooligan Soccer. That is a podcast network we are on. Looking forward to doing some great things with them and the other podcasts on the network as well. So more to come there. But yeah, I think that's it. So we'll be back with you probably Sunday or Monday night, something like that, after the Bournemouth match to talk about that. And until then, take care and bye. Bye.